Quite the flashy-looking Frankie. Here's your spooky spot on NECA Toys Universal Monsters Retro Glow-in-the-Dark Frankenstein's Monster. Collect the whole creepy crew of Universal Film monsters, all posable and ready for action. Classic toy and classic horror fans alike will enjoy these loving modern tributes that draw inspiration from the 1980s Universal famous mini monster toy collection. Combining retro toys with NECA's likeness sculpts, these 7-inch scale figures also glow in the dark. Ooh, before we get a closer look at the new Universal Monsters Retro Glow-in-the-Dark Frankenstein's Monster, I'd like to send out an eerie thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys, who may or may not be currently dwelled inside of a dark castle somewhere deep and dark in the woods. But they were nice enough to send over not only Frankenstein's Monster, but also Mummy and Wolfman that we'll be looking at in separate scary videos. That being said, let's go ahead and grab the tape measure right now to figure out how tall Frankie stands. It would be safe to say that yes, Frankie is using the exact same mold as the other two we've gotten before. If you were to make that assumption, your assumption would be correct. Still, though, measuring off to the very top of the figure's head, you're looking at Frankenstein's Monster standing at around that 7.5-inch height, and that works out to be a figure that's about 18.5 centimeters tall. Adding on to the further frights, let's bring in the other Frankenstein's monsters we've gotten before from NECA Toys. Here's what the glow-in-the-dark retro Frankie looks like next to the colorized version of Frankenstein. And here's also what he looks like next to the black and white. Yes, you're right, they're not all sharing the same heads. I generally like to display the black and white Frankenstein's monster with that silly look on his face, while the more somber-looking face usually gets dedicated to the colorized version when I have him on the shelf. If I can just stop this review for a second, I did want to actually draw your attention to the packaging that comes included with Frankenstein. For this, it may involve me having to actually move the figure over. Just want to show you what the card actually looks like. I was reluctant really to open this up. I might even find myself picking up a second set of these to keep them inside the card. The blister card looks so classic and so retro. I think I'd be definitely in line to pick up another line of these, another set of the three. You can also see as well by the opener of this video that it only took very little time to actually cut this all out. I do like the way they've actually got the glowing effect behind it. It actually kind of looks like he's glowing radiation. And a nice black and white image there of Frankenstein. Down below you've got Frankenstein's monster. But again, like the card itself, something also one of the reasons why I did want to bring the packaging in. The card, I suspected first was going to be a really thin card. In fact, it's actually about 3 times the thickness of what I was expecting. This is about the thickness of a rim for a hat. If you ever wear yourself a ball cap, I don't know what the term that teens are calling them now, but if you ever wear yourself a baseball cap, it's about that same thickness of cardboard. And I was really surprised to see that they used this much to make the card. Featured, though, on the back, they're in black and white. Although, obviously, you can see Frankenstein's monster is not in black and white. He's actually been colorized. Again, a really nice-looking card. We're going to move that out of the way. I definitely could see myself getting another one of those. One thing you may also notice, too, is the fact I didn't have anything else here with Frankie. That, yeah, the figure doesn't come included with any other accessories. The other 2 Frankies we've already had a look at, yes, did in fact come with lots of accessories, extra hands, a flower, and all those things that go along with them. But unfortunately, this one gives way of all that. Probably the reason for that is if it was to be based on the classic figure collection, then including accessories would have made no sense whatsoever. So they decided just to cut out the accessories altogether. What we do, though, get here from Frankenstein is a interesting looking figure that best suits the figure when he's obviously glowing in the dark. Now, for that, of course, I'm going to have to cut the lights a little bit later. But first, let's actually have a closer look at the face sculpt here. And for the purpose of obviously having this look on an expression, probably would be making most of the sense to actually bring in the color versions of Frankenstein so you can see it is using the exact same head sculpt. They have obviously muted a lot of the features by adding the coat of paint that they added on top of it. So like some of the sunken in cheeks, for example, get lost, unfortunately, when it comes to having this much paint being applied over top of it. The colors are really primary in this case. And obviously, in order for it to benefit from being a glow-in-the-dark figure, they really, of course, had to pull the reins back. Pull the reins back a little bit when it comes to actually not only showing the finer features, but also adding a second coat of paint as well. I do like the coloring of his eyes. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more detailing. Maybe we would have to be honest with ourselves. There's so much more detailing happening here in the colorized version. But I gotta say, I really like the look of this Frankenstein only having really jet black eyes and outlining those eyes, the bags underneath, with an outlining of black. He still has the scar, though, on the top. Although being the way they've painted it, it does really have a more simplified look to it. Still has, as well, the bolts on the side. But gone away, unfortunately, is the blood that's around the bolts. As you can see, it's basically just the bolt itself. One thing I did want to point out, though, that with this specific Frankenstein, I'm going to be, again, using this one for the comparison. While he does have the bolt there, the little staple there on the side, and he does have the hair that comes down, unfortunately much of that really gets then lost when they painted it on this figure. I wish they could have actually, and I would have to go back and look at those original retro toys. Maybe this is right. But you can see like the tops of his bangs. The front of his box cut, unfortunately, has been painted as well. Where, as you can obviously see with the case of the colored version of Frankenstein, that part would have still been painted black. So, unfortunately, that had to be... I guess, I don't know, I would be safe to say it's consistent across all the Frankenstein's monsters. I mean, if you had the chance to pick this figure up for yourself, let me know down below in the comments section if your front hair also has the paint going all the way up to the top. Other than that, though, I really like the look of the face quite a lot. Of course, his jacket stays still consistent with the other one. Now, in this case, also the jacket, while being very close to color, the color of his shirt underneath is very much a bright, what would you call that, a teal? An aquamarine? Either way, it's like a green-based blue, and that's underneath his jacket, where this one would have had the black underneath. The arms are the same, again, going more the kind of softer green instead of that off kind of grayish beige color. Kind of a reddish beige, I guess, would have been the color of Frankenstein for this case. And yeah, like boots and stuff are all still sticking the same. There's really less the wash on this one, and really only relying on just the black plastic alone. There's like a few little areas where you can see and pinpoint that there's paint that's been applied, but most of it is actually just the plastic alone. It's not necessarily a bad thing at all. In fact, if anything, I would say the only part that actually not stumbles a bit, but part that I wish could have been painted a little bit better is just the top of his hair. But again, that could also be really closer to the way the original toy line was, where the hair was actually just disappeared altogether by the paint that was applied on top of it. Just reaching off to the camera, just off to the side here. I'm going to bring in my actual black light. Now, I am still going to cut the lights, but I find the black light is also helping to show you guys what it looks like when it's glowing in the dark. I'm going to turn this on, and obviously not pointing towards you guys, but if I just shine it in front of Frankie's face, you can see how well that glows. And being the fact that the eyes are as dark as they are, and being the fact that the outlines around the eyes are as dark as they are, it really does help those eyes to stand out. And one of the reasons why I would imagine they kept the colors very simple on Frankenstein, in fact, actually just moving the light away, you can see how he retains just a little bit of that glow, just a little bit of that light that's been absorbed to the plastic. Now, it glows there, and it obviously glows down below in the hands. Nowhere else on the figure, other than maybe just finding lint in the odd cat hair. There doesn't seem to be any other place on the figure that's going to be detected here by the light source. And then, of course, obviously, we're going to be cutting the lights if you guys want to get the full effect of what Frankenstein's monster looks like in the dark. Cutting now the lights, you may or may not be able to make out Frankenstein, but once again, I'm just going to shine the light from my black light here and see if I can get a little bit of glowing action actually happening. Obviously, the rule of thumb when it comes to glowing in the dark anything seems to be that the longer you have it in front of a lamp source, the longer, of course, that plastic's going to be able to absorb the light. And once again, just moving that out of the way. It does a pretty good job. Although, obviously, here in front of me, I can see it a lot clearer than probably what you guys can see in front of the camera right now. For the figure articulation, though, on Frankenstein, it's going to be the exact same as the other two we looked at before. The head is on a ball joint, so yes, it does rotate all the way around. There's always the risk, of course, that the back of the hair is going to be clipping against the sides of the bolts for his neck. So then just be careful when it comes to rotating the head away. And of course, you're going to want to bring the head a little bit higher up just to clear those bolts on either side. The head does look down still, looks up, and also rocks back and forth as well. I always like to have my Frankensteins with a slightly tilted head. Do you like to do that as well? Let me know down below in the comment section. The arms do come out. They do come if you get a little more persistent with bending them. They get a little bit under that 90-degree angle bend threshold. It gets a little bit, I would say, 75 degrees on that angle bend. Arms, of course, rotate all the way around. Stating, I'm sure, already the obvious, the jacket is made of a softer plastic. I mean, not that it impedes necessarily any of the articulation. Figure does have a single hinge in the elbow only, but allows at least the arm to rotate back and forth. The hands as well rotate all the way around and hinging back and forth. Periodically, though, as you're rotating this specific figure, because there's so much additional paint that's been applied over top of the surface, so allowing it to glow, yes, while rotating the arm back and forth and especially hinging up and down, I've already noticed a little bit of paint flaking off from the joint, but nothing that's a deal breaker. Upper torso is on a ball joint, so you can rotate that all the way around. The legs do split out the same fashion as the other Frankie. You can bring the legs forward, you can bring the legs back. There's a mild swivel at the top of the thigh, possessing only a single hinge on the lower leg, but the lower leg at least allows the rotation of the leg back and forth. And like the one we looked at before, he has an ankle pivot back and forth this way, and it also moves up and down this way as well. Oh, by the way, as well, Frankenstein does have, like the other two, pegals on the undersides of his feet. He has really enough blockiness in his feet anyways, that he seems to stand fine. Of course, you can always use yourself a display stand, not only the ones that NECA Toys put out, but the ones that other companies put out as well, because they're generally all using the same sized peg. And once again, we can bring in the black and white version of Frankenstein. We can also bring in the colorized version of Frankenstein's monster. I want to make sure I throw in monster on the end of that. Nice looking figures, though. I mean, obviously, when you're comparing all three, the one in the middle is the simplest of the three. They had to, of course, pull back a lot of the finer features that were on the other two Franks. But, of course, that was to benefit the additional glow-in-the-dark paint. And the glow-in-the-dark paint does do wonders to actually let this guy glow in the dark. This would be one to work really well, like in an office space, somewhere around a desk area where you always have a lamp shining down on it, that when you then cut the lights, if you're leaving for the day, or even if you like to work somehow in the dark, maybe you're like a vampire, then Frankenstein, of course, will glow, pulsate that really bright green. And it works really quite well for this existing mold. Getting the most mileage out of a monster mold, NECA has now released a third version of Frankenstein's monster, and I don't think it's going to be replacing anytime soon the colorized version that we already got before, or my favorite of the three, the silver screen black and white version of Frankie. There's definitely still a place on the shelf for those. I mean, obviously, they most resemble the way that Boris Karloff looked like in the classic film, and they also benefit from having accessories that, sadly for Frankie here, we can't say the same, because this one is based on more the original 80s glow-in-the-dark toy line. Those original toys never had accessories. What you're getting instead on this Frankenstein is not only glow-in-the-dark skin, so anything that's visible on him, that's skin, like his arms, his hands, his neck, and his head, are all the things that glow a bright green, as hopefully you saw in this video. What this also does as well is not only giving us a glow-in-the-dark option, but I think it also gives us a Frankenstein that the older stuff that would have gone around for merchandise like t-shirts, stickers, coloring books, anything that would have had Frankenstein's face on the front of it, generally had more of a cartoonier or a more simplified looking Frankenstein. If not for anything else, if you got magazines that would obviously have the picture of the real Boris Karloff wearing the makeup, then that was one thing. But I found generally when it came to stickers and all the things that would have merchandise with Frankenstein's monster on it, generally had Frankenstein really with like black eyes and kind of very a simplistic looking face. And I think for that is all the more reason why this one also belongs on your shelf just as much as the other two. It doesn't have as much the details showing as the other two figures, but I think definitely there's still a place on the shelf for a glow-in-the-dark version of retro Frankenstein. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And once again, a big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide the Frankenstein's retro Frankenstein that we could have a look at in this video. They were also nice enough to send over the mummy and the werewolf. So we are going to be looking at, I said werewolf, wolfman. We are going to be looking at the wolfman and the mummy in their own standalone videos. But making sure the crucial point in all of this is, first of all, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like? But if you're loving the content, yes, and you want to stick around for more, then yeah, sure. Make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. I know it just sounds like I'm mammering behind the camera. What is he blabbering on about the subscribing, about hitting the bell notification? That helps you to get that 411 from a friendly monster just down by the water. I'm sure he's only going to help you swim. But those give you the reminders, at least, of whenever new videos are going to be popping up. And like I said, we are going to be looking at the glow-in-the-dark retro mummy and glow-in-the-dark retro wolfman in their own separate standalone videos. So make sure you're keeping your goblin peepers peeled to this channel. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.